Welcome to Real Estate Radio Live, an informative and engaging podcast discussing everything you need to know about the world of real estate. Your host, Joe Caccera, provides you with insight and guidance on how to buy, sell, finance, and invest in real estate. He also offers real estate tax management strategies, new construction advice, home improvement tips, and much, much more. And now, to guide you around the world of real estate, here's your host and Real Estate Radio Live team leader, Joe Caccera.
Welcome in, Joe Caccera with Real Estate Radio Live. Thank you for those that are watching us on the live feed on Facebook. We appreciate that very much. It is Wednesday. No, it's not Wednesday. Today's Tuesday. I'm going to get mixed up here. So we normally have Mike and I are normally in studio on Wednesdays talking real estate, two Italian guys talking real estate, but Mike is remote, and today is Tuesday with a change of schedule, so it'll be fun to have a conversation again. We're going to talk about planning for 2019 for buyers and sellers. Before we jump in, just a reminder, during the week, we try to stick to Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays right around this time, 3 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. It is a podcast, even though we do the live feed on Facebook, on social media. So if you haven't done so, please download the podcast. You could do that by going to iTunes. Just type in Real Estate Radio Live, Stitcher, Google+, or you could go to our website, RERL-1590, and get the podcast there. The focus always education information. We'll continue to do that, and we do that by having great guests, partnerships, and series of shows and content to share with you about real estate and hopefully making you a more wise, educated consumer in and around your real estate. All right, let's jump in. Mr. Mike D'Ambrosio is on with us. And, Mike, good to have you back for Two Italian Guys Talking Real Estate. How's it going today?
It's going good, thank you. Good to be on. Good to be remote, I guess. Well, it's not great because we're not in studio, but, you know, it is what it is.
It's not the same chemistry, but thank God for technology, so we're good.
There you go. Exactly.
So we're good. Good to have you here. And we are today, the topic is going to be planning for 2019 from a consumer's perspective. So Mike and I are going to talk a little bit about finishing up 2018, but more importantly, what should buyers be thinking about as we move into 2019, and then what should sellers be thinking about? Are they positioned correctly? What kinds of things should they be doing? Should they be getting pre-approved now? Should they wait till they, are about ready to get on the market? And what should the preparation and some of the things they're doing now, is it any different with the market, what we're forecasting in 2019? So we're going to talk a little bit about that and get Mike's opinions and thoughts, and then we're going to go back and forth a little bit about, again, best planning purposes for 2019. So as we kind of finish up 2018, Mike, we've talked a lot about the year. The market's changed a little bit. It's more of a normal market you and I have talked about. Maybe you could give us, if you would, before we jump in, just kind of give us a quick idea of the market just as we wrap up 2018 in terms of inventory and, some of the progress and what's happening out there.
Yeah, absolutely. The market, as a lot of people know, was on fire when the year started in January. And the real main reason for that was that we had maybe 200 houses for sale in the entire county of Santa Clara. And I'm using Santa Clara County as a, barometer for the rest of the areas because this is the heart of Silicon Valley. So that's why the market really started on fire this year. And as we got on in the year, a lot of sellers jumped into the market, wanted to catch the ride of the height. And what happened was we got a lot more inventory came on, and we finally went above 2,000 active units in the county, which is what we need to be considered a normal, quote unquote, more normal market, somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 units. And that really kind of leveled the market out. It got more normal, as Joe alluded to before. And so I think a combination of increased inventory this year and buyer pullback just because they were sickened with with what had been going on in the past, and especially early on in the year and in the years past. And I think with the stock market going up and down, I think just people pulled back this year, and it really kind of leveled things out, which, as Joe and I have talked about in podcasts in the past, is a good thing. It's healthy. And now getting to where we're at today, obviously we have, a week or two left in the year. and we're now back down to about 1,300 active units in the market, under 900 single-family residences in the county. So we've come back down to the levels we've been seeing in years past in the summertime. So now we're back down to that. I don't think we're going to be as low as we were last year at the beginning of the year, just because that we have more inventory at this time of the year. So
yeah,
that's the overview, Joe. I hope I didn't go too long on that.
No, that was good.
Where we come from.
No, that was perfect, and I'm glad you gave us a summary, Mike, because, you know, if I'm not mistaken, at one point this year we had, a little over 2,000 maybe in inventory on the market? Yeah, so you're saying we're down around 1,600 to 1,700 now. So, again, this is something to keep in mind and just keep an eye on. If you're working with an agent like you should, with someone like Mike who really understands this market, they're on this stuff every day, so it's going to be really important. If you're a person listening to the podcast, or if you're listening to us, you know, right now, or viewing us online, but later on if you're listening to the podcast, really important that if you're planning to put your home on the market or buy, either one of those, in the next 30, 60, 90 days, you should be really putting an action plan in place now. And that's what Mike and I are going to talk about when we say plan. It's one thing just to say, oh, yeah, I'm planning, but what does that mean? And we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things you should be doing in that planning process. You shouldn't wait. For instance, if you're thinking, gosh, you know, I'd really want to put my house on the market in February or March, then you're going to want to sit down with someone like Mike and talk to him. What does that mean? What kinds of things will you need to do? On the flip side, if you're thinking about, you know, I'm going to start looking again in January or February, what types of things will you need to do? Before we jump into that, Mike, in general, it's kind of irritating to me just because maybe I'm getting older, but I'll be honest.
You're not old, Joe.
I'm just getting honest about maybe I've been in business too long, but, you know, the perception and, well, gosh, you know, Christmas is coming. I'm going to take my home off the market. Gosh, I'm not going to put it back on until after the Super Bowl. I know in general the reason why those concepts are in place or those beliefs are in place, but maybe address the people today how, you know, business, life, real estate has changed a little bit. And, you know, really if you want to sell or buy, explain to them why, you know, the timing should be theirs and not everyone else's.
Yeah, the timing should definitely be on their own terms. And I think especially in an area, if you and I were sitting back in Michigan or New York or somewhere where there was, you know, 10 feet of snow on the ground, and things are a little bit different across the country, right?
Right.
And, you know, real estate literally shuts down for a few months because you really can't show houses, or it's very difficult to get around and show property. So I think in that sense, we live in a very unique area for that. And therefore, you shouldn't let anyone else dictate what you're doing other than yourself. I mean, what's good for your own situation? And frankly, the holidays are sometimes a really good time to sell because there's less competition out there. We've seen that obviously within the last 2 months. We've reduced inventory almost 1,000 units just in the last month alone. And then you have less competition. You have more serious buyers looking because there are a lot of people that take a break at this time, and that's understandable. Yeah. But the people that are looking are very serious. And, you know, oftentimes, you know, people that are going to take their time during this time of the year are serious, or they have a job relocation or something that's triggering this, you know, tax implications or whatever that's triggering this whole thing. So don't wait around for what other people tell you to do. I mean, if it's the right situation, go for it.
Yeah, and one of the things I want to key in on right before we switch gears a little bit is you heard what Mike said. I mean, we were up around 2,000 to 2,100 in inventory, and now we're down around 16 or 17, which is more of a normal market. But keep in mind, for those potential sellers 3 or 4 months ago when you had 2,000 or plus homes on the market, and you were saying to yourself or your real estate agent, gosh, you know, I'm concerned with the inventory. Now, again, this is the value of knowing what's going on in the marketplace. When you're 300 to 400 less, you know, that just tells you as a seller, right, there could be a better chance that you may have a little better opportunity. Nothing guaranteed, but you could if there's fewer homes on the market now. So let's talk first about sellers. Let's focus on that first. You know, you're meeting with someone or someone's thinking about it right now, and they're, you know, meeting with you and asking some questions and really thinking, you know, let's say the consumer or your client is saying, you know, my goal is to really get this back on the market maybe February, March. what types of things, I know it varies for each individual, but if you could take us through kind of a checklist of things you would ask, things you would want, what a consumer should know if they sit down and plan with someone like yourself for putting their home on the market a couple months from now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really good to get the process started early on, just like, and we're going to talk about buyers too, but get the process started with a professional. There are a lot of things that you have to do to get a home ready to sell if you want to do it the right way. I mean, you can do it the half-assed way and put it on in a week, but that's for you to decide. I think that if you are really adamant about waiting until February or whatnot, you sign up with an agent, get the paperwork started. Really the main thing right now is to get like inspections done, like property, termite inspection, roof, because if there's any major things or things that your real estate professional feels will provide you the most value or bang for the buck to fix or, head off problems ahead of time, that's something to get started. And then your realtor should have a pre-marketing plan as well. There's a lot of marketing things that we can do ahead of going on MLS to potentially get the property sold. So there's that part. So there's the inspection part, the marketing part. And I mean, a perfect example of that is I have quite a few listings coming on in January and February. One of which, it's a fixer upper, but we got the reports done and one of the things that came back on, and a lot of it, the house is older, so it does need work, but they're not going to do much because it's a fixer and whoever buys it's probably going to gut the place. But one of the things that we found was that there's an extreme rodent problem underneath the house, right?
Right.
And that is definitely something you don't want to have as an active issue when you're doing open houses, you're having showings. I mean, that's definitely something that I recommended. Hey, it's a relatively inexpensive thing to do. You should definitely get it done because we don't want to have showings and have, rodents running through the house or, God forbid, some of them die underneath the house and the place stinks. I mean, that's just an example of things that you can start working on over the next month or so, or if there's things that need to get fixed in the house. So the big two things are inspections and getting that done, and then a pre-marketing plan and getting all of that done too.
Great. If someone's sitting down right now with you, Mike, and let's say you're just going to put the house on the market in February, a couple months down the road, is it too early? What if the potential sellers say, "Gosh, Mike, I know it's a little bit early, but what kind of idea what would we put my house on the market for?" Is that too premature? Would you give them ballpark figures? How would that work?
I'd give them ballpark figures with the notion of knowing that we're going to go over these numbers again before we put it on the market.
Okay.
I don't think that unless there's some extreme comparable that comes into play, there's not a whole lot that can change within a month or two, unless, like I said, there's like this crazy sale that happens. But you definitely have to refresh the comparables and talk about what's called the comparable market analysis, the CMA. You do that really when you start talking about listing the property, and then you do it again right before you list the property, just to make sure there's no major changes. But I definitely would give them, a ballpark.
Right. Let's talk about and I don't know the numbers, but I know statistically, I think it's about 70 to 75% of people that sell their home, Mike, they eventually buy another one, or they go to buy another one. Some people don't. Some people will sell and then, go rent for a while, or some people are selling, they're done. But for the most part, people, when they sell, they're buying again, whether it's locally, a move up, out of state, what have you. So how does that come into play if you're sitting down with someone that's strategically wanting to list their home in February, but on the flip side, they tell you, listen, and I know you'd be asking them, what's your plan after you sell? What does that conversation look like? I know they become a buyer now, but it's unique because, you're trying to really guide them from both perspectives.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think that if it's buying locally or elsewhere, you want to get that process started too, so they can start seeing what the inventory looks like in whatever market that they're going to buy in. So I think that that's a very important part of it as to what they're going to do. And then really, as you know, and you can probably talk, not probably, you can talk in this, Joe, is, what's the financing going to look like if they have enough equity in their current house to buy, or do they need to get additional financing? If it's an investment property, are they going to 1031 exchange? So there's a lot of things that go into outside of just, looking for houses as financing as well.
Yeah, so as Mike said, to piggyback on that, if you are, in the position where you're talking to Mike or someone, a professional that is getting ready to potentially list your house after the first of the year and your plan is to take those proceeds and buy, you definitely want to talk to a lender, obviously, someone like myself or anyone that you have a relationship with, to make sure that's part of that overall plan. And Mike and I talk about this a lot. If you listen to our shows, the one thing that is very common, the common thread is make sure you're working with the right team of people and make sure it's people you trust and that could execute on it. Because too often times, again, maybe it sounds like a broken record, but the reason we talk a lot about this is because it's a big financial decision. I know you hear people talk about that a lot, but it is true. And one of the things that frustrates me more than anything, and I know Mike, I'm not going to speak for him, but I know him too, is when someone just willy-nilly kind of picks someone, either a real estate agent, a lender, and says, well, it's my uncle, my brother, or it's someone that said I might, and you don't do your due diligence and you don't really, find out if they're the right fit or not. So I want to talk a little bit about that, Mike, because it's so important. What are some of the things, I know we've covered it before, but this is part of the planning for me. I think for consumers, this is part of the planning process. How do you go about selecting the right real estate agent? That's the first question. Kind of take me through some of the questions they should be asking if they're getting ready to represent, let's say on a sell side. But more importantly, what if someone says to you, I want you to talk about too, is, I've used this real estate agent for 10 or 15 years, and it's because, it's a family friend or it's a relative. What is your feedback for someone that gives you a comment like that?
It's always my
be
feedback.
nice.
I guess I should be polite about this, but I've never heard a lot of great stories with people that say, "Oh, my wife's sister's friend is a realtor," or
That's
whatever.
A good point. That's a good point. Yeah.
I've never 9 times out of 10. Now there's always that 1 out of 10 chance that it's a very professional person, and that's good. But 9 times out of 10, I haven't heard great results from that type of a situation, forced family or friend situation, I guess you would call it. So that being said, where are you looking for a realtor? I mean, I think referrals, obviously from, coworkers or whoever you really trust that has actually had an experience with a professional agent that is doing business, I think is important. I think you should interview, 2 or 3 people to list your home, especially. I think it's worth your time and effort to do so and make sure you're hiring the right person. And then, what are the questions you're going to ask them? I mean, really in their listing presentation, they should be going over what their experience is, how long they've been in the business, how many transactions are they doing on a yearly basis? What does their team look like? Do they have a list of qualified people that can help prep a house? All that stuff. Then talking about their company, are they at a reputable company? And what is the marketing firepower behind that company? And also errors and omissions and insurance and all sorts of things that come along with working at a reputable firm.
Right.
And then they need to talk about what the marketing plan is going to look like and what they're going to do to sell their home for top dollar. So what does that look like? The fourth thing they should talk about is, and I'm basically walking you through the 5 parts of my listing approach.
Right.
And then, they should talk about the sales process. What does that look like? What's the paperwork look like? What's the step-by-step part of the process? When's it going on the market? When's open houses? When's showings? All that stuff. They need to talk about that. And then really talking about the value of the home is the last piece.
Right.
And then, so those are the things that you should be looking for in a professional agent.
Right. So one of the things I want to resonate right now, if you're listening to this or watching this, is what you just heard Mike saying. The reason why is that you heard him talk about the steps, but you also heard him talk about the important components of the questions asked and what you should be looking for in a real estate agent. And so I'm going to expand on that a little bit right now because in jest and kind of being a little bit funny and sarcastic, Mike, I've done examples of, interviewing a real estate agent or a lender, right? And my analogy is, I do the 2 different examples. So I'd say if you sit down with someone and it's a real estate agent and they ask, why you, and the real estate agent says stuff like this, I've been in the business 20 years, everybody loves me, and don't worry, I'll get the job done. Right?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's
cool.
that's red flag. Red flag. No different if you're with a lender. Yep. You sit down with a lender, and why should I do business with you? And you say the same thing. Hey, listen, I've been financing for 20 years. I have the best rates possible. I'm your guy with the double thumbs up, right? So what's funny is you'll get that a lot. I mean, it's funny, but it's not funny. And so my point behind this is that what Mike just described to you, and I've given examples too, and we call it scripting. Now, if you sit down with someone and it's on the lender or on the real estate agent side, right, and you say, why you, Mike? And Mike or someone else says, well, let me tell you my background, but I'm going to also go through my marketing strategies. I also could tell you that, over the last 6 months, 10 homes have sold in that zip code, and I've gotten over 20% more for that pricing. In other words, when you find someone that really gets into the nuts and bolts of that question you ask, and they just don't say, I'm great, and look at what I drive, and I'm not top 1%, or any of those types of things, if someone goes into detail about their plan for you, like Mike just did, those are good indications. Same as if you're sitting down with a lender, right? If a lender says, well, let me find out more about you. Let's take some information. What's your plan for this house? How long are you going to be in it? Do you plan to have a family? If so, if you're planning for children, is this a home you're going to have for 5 or 7 years or more? And is this a home maybe you might be renting somewhere down the road? Because if it is, maybe a 30-year fix is not for you. And let's talk about your down payment, your comfort level, your payment. In other words, so those are types of answers and interaction you want to hear. And we're making fun a little bit, but, I'll let Mike speak to it. But these are some of the things that that the consumer needs to watch out for, right?
Absolutely. I don't know how much more I can add to that other than I like your joke
more scripting.
Yeah, I like your joke about I'm great, 2 thumbs up. That was good. I like that. I'm not going to use that. I'm not going to use that.
Well, you know what I mean. I mean, it's funny, but it's not. But how many people in our business, right? That's their unique selling proposition. That's their, whatever you call it. When you say why you, and some people are taken out by surprise, matter of fact, when you say why you, and they shouldn't be. Anybody that's in a business that treats it like a business, you're prepared for why you. For the people that aren't prepared for why you, they're going to get answers like, I'm the greatest, people love me, I've been doing this for 20 years, and, just ask anybody. I mean, if you get answers like that those aren't good answers.
No, I mean, I know there's some top agents in my market that literally show up to a listing presentation with some of their magazine ads and just say, this is me. Look at what I do, and that's about it.
Got it. So they're trying to sell.
Pretty amazing.
No, it is. We're making a little bit of fun, but seriously, it is serious. We're having some fun here, but understand the message that Mike and I are trying to get across is that when you're interviewing an agent to represent you or a lender to represent you, these are some big financial decisions. And so what we're trying to do is really educate you to, when you sit down with that person, if you hear some of those examples like Mike and I talk, if you're feeling good about, boy, this person really understands the marketplace, and they get down to brass tacks and they really take you through this path or this process, those are good signs. If it's very vague and if it's very generic in nature, and they spend a lot of time talking about how cheap they are, how cheap the rates are, or how long they've been in the business, I'm just telling you those are typically not good things that you want to hear, and you want to be careful with those type of answers. So we have about 4 or 5 minutes left, Mike. Let's jump in and talk a little bit about the buy side. So we've addressed the sellers, some of the things they should do, the interview process. Is the interview process any different if someone's interviewing you to list their home versus a buyer?
It's not a whole lot different. I think the difference is in the presentation. I mean, you should have an in-person meeting with your potential future buying realtor, buying agent. And again, get to know them. What are their qualifications? What company do they work for? Mm-hmm. What's their network like? Talk about the market and where it's at. And from a buyer standpoint, talk about the process and what they do in a competitive market to help get your offer accepted. I mean, there's a lot of things. We could do a whole podcast on that. And I think we've talked about it in the past. And then talk about your wants and needs and really what you're looking for in a dream home, and then, so kind of along the same lines as the listing side,
right.
but just kind of flip on some things. And then the other part is really, and this is your part, Joe, is really talking about the financing and are they with a reputable lender, and are you going to connect them with that, and then what does that process look like? And so maybe you can talk on that.
Yeah, on the buy side, it's super critical. It really is. Obviously, you want to work with a professional team. Someone knows what they're doing. Best. I always say this, whoever gives you the best chance to succeed and win. And it is amazing, how many people could, percentage-wise, could get that job done. But definitely, if you're on the buy side, I can't stress enough, you really need to get pre-approved. And when I say pre-approved, remember the wording, it should be underwritten approved. I know there's a lot of stuff thrown out there. You see in the newspapers or online. You'll hear the phrase pre-qualified. That's very, very loose and vague. That's not good. You'll hear the word pre-approved. That's better, but you need to go a little bit deeper when someone says pre-approved. Anybody could issue a letter. So what's really important is, you ask your lender or meet with someone that actually has you underwritten approval, which means once you give them all your documentation, they get it to an underwriter. In other words, they get it to someone's job is to underwrite that file. What they call is a credit underwritten file. So obviously we don't have a property yet. So what we're doing is we're underwriting your profile as a credit risk to that potential purchase. So we have everything we need except the property, which is fine. So the property is going to come. So that file should be looked at really as if you had a property, but you don't have a property, if that makes sense, so that you're good to go and you get the approval from an underwriter within the company, and then a letter could be issued. But that's really important. Keep that in mind if you're out there listening or you're working with someone that, talking about another red flag, because I like to give examples. I think people, understand them better. If you're on the phone with a lender or in person and they say, no problem, just give me a few bits of information, and you say, okay, I make $10,000 a month and I'm putting $200,000 down, and hey, my credit's awesome, it's 780. And they say, perfect, I'll issue you a letter. That's a red flag. Number one, they need to verify your income with W-2s, tax returns. Number two, they need to verify assets, where that down payment's coming from. What if it's gift funds? What if it's coming from another source? Number three, the one thing I could tell you that I see and hear all the time, and I hate it because consumers, it's so easy to miss. I hear all the time now, well, Credit Karma tells me my credit score is this, or Credit.com tells me our credit score is this. I could tell you that about 90% of the time they're not accurate because they're not pulling all three credit bureaus, and it's not being pulled as if you're making a transaction or a purchase. It's very generic in nature, and it's sad, but the education process is not good out there. You're led to believe that you could check your credit any time and you're going to know your credit. So if you get a couple things out of this conversation with Mike and I today on the pre-approval side, make sure you get your credit pulled as well. And anybody that gives you a pre-approval letter or talks about being pre-approved without pulling your credit is doing you a disservice, and it could cause some problems.
There you go.
So,
that's it.
Yeah. We'll wrap things up. We're just about out of time. Mike, if anyone wants to reach you, wants more information, how to work with you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, you can go to my website, MikeDSells.com. You can always reach out, 408-630-0101.
Great. Thanks, Mike. Thanks for calling in, and have a great afternoon.
All right, thanks, Joe. You too.
All right, take care. This is Joe Kuchera with Real Estate Radio Live. Thanks again for those tuning in on Facebook. We appreciate that very much. And for those, if you haven't done so, please pass it along. Download the podcast. You can do that anywhere. Take care. Have a great afternoon. Thanks again for checking in.
You've been listening to Real Estate Radio Live. For more information on today's program, visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Subscribe to our podcast. Discover more at RERadiolive.com.